Welcome to the NitWits, a weekly roundtable discussion on the Penn State Nittany Lions, now in its 23rd season. Our panel features a longtime Penn State media and NitWits tag team, Neil Rudell of the Altoona Mirror and Mark Brennan of Lions 247 with Fight on State. The NitWits are hosted by WTAJ's Jack Washer, and each week we welcome a former Nittany Lion as our special guest analyst. The NitWits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By Encompass Health, a higher level of care. Encompass Healthcare. Ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, carpet cleaning, and rug cleaning. By Reed and Solani Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington. By Allegheny Street Cigar, Blair County's only cigar lounge. By McAleer's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing and heating and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By Freedom RV, Freedom RV Rentals, your best vacation ever. By Remax Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Star Beverage, no matter what type of weather, we are a convenient drive-through one-stop beer store. By Kogan Electric, lighting the way for you. By Lions 247 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday.
Welcome to Nittany Nation Overtime.
And welcome into Nittany Nation Overtime Week 2 edition. I'm Jack Washer. Joined with me is the NitWits panel. That would be Neil Rudell from the Altoona Mirror, Tyler Donahue filling in for Mark Brennan. He also works for Lions 24/7, and former Penn State defensive lineman Justin Kirk-Pecos. Gentlemen, I assume you watched the game yesterday, and I assume you had a lot of different thoughts throughout the game. If you were a Penn State fan watching out there, you probably went through the full spectrum of emotions. Neil Rudell, you've been watching Penn State football a long time. How does this one stack up?
Well, I think it was just a really terrible ending. I know, obviously the 2-point call, a lot of people disagree with that, and I understand that, but, to me, it just can't get to that point. They were in a position to win this game with everything that had gone wrong, and I just think that the instructions and the communication and the understanding of the play and Devin Ford, he just can't score in that situation. And I thought it was really an unfortunate way to start a season, and now you have Ohio State coming in. So I just think it has to be at the feet of the coaches and James Franklin, and for that to not be executed, it just was a really, really bad loss.
Justin, it had been 301 days since Penn State had last played a football game. From a player's perspective, did they look prepared, kind of as that game begins and as it continues to unfold?
So what I'll say first is thanks for having me down again to my yearly trip down here. I enjoyed playing football. We always had the agreement it had to be after a win. So
I know.
We're going to have to renegotiate my contract for next year. This was not fair. But so here's the thing. I'm not going to get into the specifics of this or that, because what I try to do when I come down here is kind of go back to emotions or games that were similar when I played. I think that's what people want to hear. Now, my senior year, we lost to USC the first game and the Toledo the second game. Here's the thing. You're never as bad as you think you are when you lose, and you're never as good as you think you are when you win, okay? And that holds true. The other thing is the most improvement you're going to see on a team is from the first to second game for the year. So, the good thing is there's a huge room from this first to second game for Penn State. And those are the things that I have to say. The sun came up today, Nittany Nation. I mean, I think you realize that. It did come up today. It was not a good game, but look to see vast improvement for next week. And also remember, when you lose, you're never as bad as you think you are.
Now, did you get those theories from Joe, or did he get them from you?
I got them from him. So probably every guy you have down here sitting in the seat repeats those, but they're true.
Yeah.
Tyler, the play everyone's talking about is that 2-point play at the end. Indiana actually had two-point conversions, but the one that won the game, you probably watched it 1,000 times like I have. What is your thought on that play? Like, did he get in? Like, do you for me personally, I understand why they couldn't overturn it because it was just too close. I think had they called him down, the call would have stood on the field. But what are your takeaways from that specific play?
Like many of my colleagues that are normally gathered on the road in a press box, and it would be a different vantage point. We'd be having so many conversations. It was me and my wife in the living room, and we had 4 eyeballs on this over and over. I was pausing it myself. I heard Mike Pereira weighing in, and he didn't seem to find anything conclusive. I felt like the bottom of the ball, that trajectory seemed to shift before the rest of the football made contact with the pylon. And you're so fixated on the effort that Penix put in, the extension, Jaquan Brisker closing in on him, and just I can't really remember, certainly a game that I have covered, much less paid this much attention to, where it truly came down to one team was going to walk off the field a winner, one team's going to walk off the field as a loser, and there's nothing they can do anymore to determine that. It's in the officials' hands. I was personally surprised that they came out and they said that the play stood. They did not confirm the call. I think the phrasing is important to pay attention to, but I was surprised. I thought it was going to be a very painful moment for the Indiana Hoosiers and a very painful moment for Michael Penix, but that Penn State was going to be able to breathe a massive sigh of relief and get on that plane and come home with a win. You know,
Justin, it probably should not have ever gotten to that point. Penn State's up 21-20, about 1:40 to go. Indiana has 1 timeout, and Devin Ford gets the ball, and Indiana parts the Red Sea. I mean, literally. And, you don't want to put it all on a sophomore. He's 20 years old. I don't know how many times he's been in that situation. Is that more on the player, or is that coaching? Because I feel like if that's coached up well, he doesn't even get anywhere near the end zone.
So here's what I'll say again, reaching back to the old football days. I did play for Bill Belichick, who everyone knows is a master of situational football. And he worked on everything. So in my thought that this should have been worked on, or at least told right before the play, you were not to score. You were to go down no matter what. So that would be my thought without having the benefit of being in the huddle or on the sideline just before the play.
Yeah, I just think that the lack of communication or communication reinforcement, when they decided they were going to do that play, I think they had to say to him, hey, look, you got to get down. You can't. They may let you score, and I do question. You got Clifford, who was having a very good second half, didn't play well in the first half. I'm not sure you should have taken the ball out of his hands at all. As we can rewind the tape there, but I think Penn State had 3 timeouts. They had plenty of time to make absolutely certain that they are in a position to get in victory formation and not give Indiana the ball back.
I want to pose this out to the group. They go up 27-20. They kick the extra point to go 28-20. The Texans about a week ago did it where they went for 2, up 7, didn't get it. Tennessee came down and scored. Should Franklin have gone for 2 and just, hey, we made a mistake, but we can get 3 more yards, put this game out of reach? Did that cross your guys' mind at all after Ford scored that touchdown?
Well, we saw Tom Allen was willing to go for 2 in overtime. He could have easily taken the extra point, lived to fight another overtime session, gone out there and played defense, and he didn't then. Who are we to know that 7 points, that would have been, or that 9 points, if you don't get that 2-point conversion, maybe 7 points isn't enough to get to overtime and survive. I think that's a valid question, and I was wondering if they might attempt that and go for the 9 points. They did not. I think probably at the time it's the right, but I do want to say, Devin Ford, the awareness of this kid, 23 touches was a big load for him. I know we're going to talk about Noah Kay not being available, but he's always been the best player in the football field every time he's set foot. His mission has been get to the end zone, and it's something that has been celebrated. It's an accomplishment. For him to shift gears, like Neil said, the reinforcement has to be there. Maybe it was, though. Everyone was very tiptoe last night in the postgame. They didn't want to throw Devin Ford under the bus. He's a sophomore with a lot of football to play ahead of him. You don't want to ruin this kid's psyche. He's already getting enough heat for this situation. Maybe it was reinforced. James Franklin seemed to say that they addressed it on the sideline. They addressed it this week on the practice field. Maybe it was just a complete mental error. He saw the goal line and he went there.
But it wasn't enough.
But what's interesting is, and even watching that replay here that we just did, you can see him chop his feet right before he crosses the goal line. It's not like he just cruised and went in. So it's almost like last minute he thought, like, wait a second, I'm not supposed to do this. And it was too late.
Override. It was like override all of a sudden. Yeah.
Now those 2 plays we talked about, those weren't the only 2 plays that decided the game. Because even if Penn State had held on to win, there are so many other very concerning areas that should make Penn State fans a little uncomfortable. We'll talk about that next.
The Nitwits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By Encompass Health, a higher level of care. Encompass Healthcare. Ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, carpet cleaning, and rug cleaning. By Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back to Nittany Nation Overtime. Now, 1 or 2 plays doesn't make a game. So, Neil, watching that from a big picture perspective, what concerns you the most as Penn State continues to go in 2020?
Well, I think number one, they got to shore up their special teams. I thought that's an area. You have a veteran kicker in Pinniger. Your special teams, just organizationally, weren't that sharp. The indecision among your returnees, you were 0 for 3 in field goals. I realized Stout almost made that 57-yarder, which would have been incredible, but it just seemed that they have some areas that, as James would say, they have to clean up on special teams.
Tyler, Sean Clifford, the last half of the game played really well. It was awesome to see him come through in the clutch, but that first half, I don't know if it was rust. I don't know if it was the fact that, he was not trusting his wide receivers, but how do you kind of evaluate, first half to second half for Sean Clifford?
The way I evaluate that first half was, are we watching the 2019 offense? I thought this was billed as something that was going to look at least substantially different. We knew there was going to be a blend aspect there, but Sean Clifford looked like an inexperienced player with those decisions outside of that first possession, which took up half the first quarter, resulted in the touchdown pass. I love the call to go for it on 4th down there and find Pat Freiermuth. But those 2 interceptions were inexcusable. They were on Sean. He took ownership of that after the game. But that's all well and good, but you can't afford to make those plays on the road, going into a situation where you've played 13 Big Ten games. Well, he's played 12 because he missed that last one. You've played 12 games as a Big Ten starting quarterback. You're expected to be able to carry that load. You've got a young supporting cast, particularly in that receiver room, that you're expected to kind of lead them rather than lean on them. And I thought that was an issue. It felt like Sean needed to lean on other guys for a period of time. And even in the second half, those 2 splash plays that resulted in touchdowns, you take those away, there was just really no consistency. There was no momentum. And one thing that still looked glaring for me, the happy feet were still in play. He contributed to being brought down in the backfield, and he ran a lot more than anyone anticipated. We thought his jersey was going to be much cleaner in 2020 based on what we saw Kirk Ciarrocca do at Minnesota. That was certainly not the case. He went for 100 rushing yards. That's great, but they haven't been able to get their quarterback to November the last couple of years healthy, and that's concerning for me.
Justin, as someone who has played the game, I know you played on defense, but twice Will Levis came in, got a delay of game, and then fumbled. On the sideline, how does that kind of change the mood when you might have some momentum going? It's not I hate to say gadget, but someone comes in for a package and it just completely blows up. Like, what I don't know if you had any experience with that, but what is the mood on the sideline when that doesn't work?
So the reason that you put in packages like that is for a spark and it's for a change up and that type of thing. So when you go in and that happens, it has the opposite effect. And then kind of to play on what you guys said is that the different phases playing off each other and feeding into each other. Listen, there's 3 parts to a football game: offense, defense, and special teams, and they are equal. And if you usually win 2 out of those 3, you win the ball game. And the way that the good teams do it is one feeds off the other, one contributes to the other, and we didn't see any of that coordination yesterday, which, again, first to second game's the most improvement. Listen, we got a lot of room, so I think we're going to see a different team this week.
Neil, the defense played pretty well for the most part, but Michael Penix did him a lot of favors. I believe he had 3 or 4 wide open receivers, a lot of defensive breakdowns in that secondary. Does that kind of concern you moving forward when, next week you got to play at Justin Fields, who is going to be a top 5 pick and will not miss those throws?
Yeah, I think their pass defense has a lot to prove. At the end of last year, that was the case, and I think this year as well. Now you're going to be without Lucetta. You're transitioning. Somebody texted me that if Parsons was there, he would have stopped that 2-point conversion, and he might have, because he's an all over the field type of player. But I think the fact that the defense, I think, played pretty well, except when the game was on the line, and you're seeing that the pattern these last 2 or 3 years, that teams are able to move the ball when they have to, although Tony played very well, and it looked like they had Indiana stopped had they knelt on the ball.
Right. Well, believe it or not, folks, Penn State did do some good things yesterday. So we give you some of those positive signs coming out of Indiana, coming up next.
The NitWits are brought to you by Allegheny Street Cigar, Blair County's only cigar lounge. By McAleer's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing and heating and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By Freedom RV Rentals, your best vacation ever. By RE/MAX Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
All right, welcome back to Nittany Nation Overtime. Let's check in with our special Penn State guest. Justin, what have you been up to since you have graduated? It's been about more than 2 decades. I'm sorry to age you there, but
I'm feeling it.
But you're still around here. You're still doing awesome things. So kind of get the people what you've been up to.
Yes, I live in State College with my wife and 4 children, which is great. I still own Atlas Therapy, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to say that we have a outpatient physical therapy clinics in State College in Altoona, and just want to let all the folks know out there that there's no other place that can touch us with patient satisfactions and outcomes. We're privately and locally owned, and extremely proud of the team we have assembled there. No one does it better, and if you need any type of rehab services, come see us, and we take care of you.
Well, we appreciate you coming down, Justin, to have 4 young kids, so to give up a Sunday night, thank you.
All right, well, there were positive things, like we mentioned in the segment before. Tyler, the 2 freshman running backs really kind of showed me something, especially with Noah King leaving the game very early and never returned, and Devin Ford trying not to give him 45 carries. So what are your kind of impressions, and is this something you expected to see, right away?
Well, until about a week ago, we didn't know that Journey Brown wasn't going to be available, and until 2 days ago, well, yesterday I should say, we didn't know that Noah Kane wasn't going to be available, and it looks like that could be extended. So now you need to know about these kids. Last year you got introduced to Noah Kane and Devin Ford in different ways. Now it's Kevon Lee and Keziah Holmes, both of those Florida products that Jaywan Sider really took a personal approach in getting them on board. I want to start with Kevon Lee because I think a lot of people said, who's this kid? Big upright runner, a force at 6 foot, 230 pounds, was recruited by Florida, who he was committed to for a while as a linebacker. Other SEC programs evaluated him as a linebacker as well. But he made it a point when we talked this summer. He says, I'm more than just a power back. People are going to see my size, see the way I run. He showed that a little bit, caught a couple passes out of the backfield. Keziah Holmes, the first number 26 in that offensive huddle since you know who, he is a little bit more of a slasher. I think he can be a dimensional receiver. He can be a kick returner if given that opportunity. But I don't know if it's there for him yet between the tackles, and I don't know if it's there for Devin Ford yet between the tackles. Even with those freshmen, Ford's still the lightest guy in that group. But I think you're going to have to get used to seeing them on the football field, and I would not be surprised if one of them has an opportunity to get double-digit touches against Ohio State, and that's quite the welcome to Power 5 football moment.
Parker Washington did a good job as a receiver, caught the touchdown pass in overtime, and Clifford played much better in the second half. We touched on running him too much, and this is through multiple coordinators that they've run the quarterback, whether it's been Clifford or McSorley, and they've had guys banged up as a result. I thought the offensive line the first half, the script, they went right down the field. It took a while. That was one thing that maybe they'll be able to build on.
Justin, had Devin Ford had gone down, Michael Penix would have been held to less than 100 yards passing. I know the defense gave it up at the end, but I would say for the majority of that game, they were pretty stout and kind of what you expected with so many guys returning, at least on the defensive line. And that secondary, you got a lot of young guys, but they seem to play. They did not seem to be fazed by, I guess the bright lights, if you want to call them that.
I know you're going to be surprised about this, but I focus on the defense, being the defensive guy, and particularly guys that rush the passer. And we were talking during the break that it's a shame that Shaka Tony's performance is going to get lost in the loss because he did play phenomenal. And then I always like a connection to a game, like probably most other people. Hey, I know this guy's son that plays, and I played with Joey Porter with the Steelers, and his son had, I would say, his breakout game yesterday, despite the fact that it's a loss. And Joey was a heck of a guy and a heck of a player, and it looks like his son's following his footsteps, so that was a bright spot.
Yeah, they used the corner blitz well early to help set a tone.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of, despite losing, I think a lot of positive momentum going into next week because it's a big game. Ohio State is next on the docket. Does Penn State have any shot to knock off the Buckeyes? We'll talk about that next.
The Nitwits are brought to you by Dorman's Jewelry. The answer is always Dorman's. By Star Beverage. No matter what type of weather, we are a convenient drive-through one-stop beer store. By Kogan Electric, lighting the way for you. By Lions 247 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
All right, welcome back to Nittany Nation Overtime. Penn State. Next up on the docket is Ohio State, and Penn State will be an 11-point underdog, at least when we are beginning to tape. I can see that line creeping up as the week goes along. But Neil, we did not have a winner last week, so what happens? You are the veteran nitwit.
Yeah, everybody's tied. The deflated ball is in first place.
So since there was no winner,
yeah, the ball, we let the air out of the ball.
and you were very kind to explain to us the ruling on that. I'm going to let you go first.
I appreciate that, Jack. Wow. I think the defense is going to have to play great, and I think the offense is somehow going to have to stay on the field to keep Justin Fields on the sidelines as much as possible. I just can't be real optimistic that Penn State can get into a shootout here. I think they're still trying to establish their receiving core and whatnot, and now you're turning to true freshman running backs. I'm going to say Ohio State 29, Penn State 13.
All right, Tyler, next up, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I think they just played this Saturday like they were in the non-conference playing a Buffalo or a Kent State, and they got a loss out of that deal. I think they will come back. They'll bounce back, but that doesn't equate to a win in my mind against this Ohio State team. The way they're constructed, the way players opted back in for their program, and the way they're built. They're not up to par defensively where they were last year, but offensively, just too many weapons, I think, for Penn State to stay the course and keep up with them for 4 quarters. I'm going to go 35-24. Ohio State. It will be a better Penn State football program, but that 0-2 pill is going to be very tough to swallow.
Justin?
So one last thing. As a former player, not one of those kids on the team yesterday woke up and said that we're going to play poorly today or that we're not going to beat Indiana. I promise you that was nowhere in their psyche. And I just want everyone to remember that as we talk about it. Every one of them woke up yesterday morning and said, we're going to crush Indiana and we're going to play very well. And it just sometimes doesn't happen. Now, bouncing back to next week, I'm going to differ from you guys. I'm thinking one of those magical upset wins we've had at Beaver Stadium versus Ohio State. I think that's going to happen in an empty stadium. So I'm going to say 35-31 Penn State in a classic.
And I am going to quickly say Ohio State's going to win 32-26. I think it'll be a close game, but I think Justin Fields is the X factor in this game. Should be no surprise. All right, that's going to do it for Nittany Nation Overtime. For Tyler, Neil, Justin, and myself, we'll see you next week recapping Ohio State.
The NitWits have been brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By Encompass Health, a higher level of care. Encompass Healthcare. Ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, carpet cleaning, and rug cleaning. By Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington. By Allegheny Street Cigar, Blair County's only cigar lounge. By McAleer's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing and heating and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By Freedom RV, Freedom RV Rentals, your best vacation ever. By Remax Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Star Beverage, no matter what type of weather, we are a convenient drive-through one-stop beer store. By Kogan Electric, lighting the way for you. By Lions 247 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.